Hey everyone, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. Ukraine has been pounding Crimea with long-range missiles for a while now, and Russians are not happy about it. Russian soldiers are crying about it. Russian propagandists are also crying about it. All of the other Russian occupation forces are feeling the heat. It is pretty bad for Russians. And in this video, we're going to be focusing about the situation in Crimea and other parts of the front line. We're going to talk about what's going to happen with Ukrainian and Russian forces and generally discuss the situation there. Next video, the third one this week, will come out a bit later, and we're going to talk about the economic situation in Russia, the elections and political outline, and finally, I'm going to give a little bit of a rant. But this one, we focus strictly on the front lines, so let's jump straight in. And as we already started talking about Crimea, so let's talk about this. Now, I obviously can talk about the recent strikes, and that would be the actual topic to talk about, and then I make the next video and talk about additional anti-air system that's been destroying. But I think the Google search kind of speaks louder than this one news that says, oh, Ukraine has destroyed the S-300 system, they destroyed the S-400 system. It's been happening both all over the mainland. Additionally, there was some radar stations that were destroyed on this smaller peninsula on top of peninsula. It's like peninsula squared. So the point is not this. The point is actually here. The point is, if you just Google something like Crimea, I write 10 ATACMS, but if you write Crimea ATACMS, you might see like 6 hours ago, 15th of May, 2 days ago, 16th of May again, 24th of May, and so on and so on. So this has been going on in a steady pace for months now. Pretty much since the Allies supplied Ukraine with long-range weapons, they have been striking Crimea non-stop. And this is showing results. Now, Russians are basically stating that it's getting really, really hard in Crimea, especially with the arrival of the ATACMS missiles. Now, ATACMS missiles are different because they're ballistic missiles. If you don't know, the cruise missiles, if you take that this is the ground, the cruise missiles, they kind of fly on and then they fly pretty low along the ground surface, taking into account that they're flying low, so it's harder for the radars to notice them, but they're flying relatively slow. And then ATACMS missiles that arrive to Ukraine, they are ballistic missiles. And ballistic missiles, they fly up all the way up in the sky, and then once they fall down because of gravity, they gain huge speed, and it requires very advanced anti-air systems to intercept them. Now, at first, Russia had these systems here. It's problematic when Ukraine takes their time to both target your radars, to make sure you're blind, to make sure to strike the targets again and again and again. Like one night, there's a couple of drones, next time there's more drones and so on. Russians are having it problematic to keep the anti-air systems anywhere in Crimea. While we are talking about potentially Ukrainians taking over the land border and maybe pushing towards Crimea and locking the Crimea in, we didn't really consider that Ukrainians might even have a naval landing done. Because let's think about it. What is really stopping Ukrainians from attacking a naval landing? And this is like one of the analysts that was throwing the idea out here, and I'm projecting it to you. Because the only kind of thing that are stopping Ukrainian naval landing is really the aviation forces that are patrolling this area. So there's like some planes. There is almost no naval activity anymore because Ukrainian drones destroyed all the naval activity in this area. So how do you deal with the aviation forces? Well, if you have your own aviation forces, and now we're talking about, well, if the Ukraine gets F-16s, if F-16s will come along and Ukraine will redeploy some of their offensive systems, long range, for example, radar plane and so on, and will be able to target these planes from this area and push them out, helicopters and planes, then suddenly this area is not really that defended. And you might say, yes, but I saw videos and Russians have fortifications on these shorelines and so on. That is true. However, you must also not forget that about, I think at the end of the last year, the Ukrainian special forces were filming themselves operating on the shores of Crimea. There are videos plus the partisan activity that is ongoing inside of Crimea. So this is a potential opportunity that we should not be dismissing. If Ukraine will turn off majority of the anti-air assets, and we're seeing that they're doing it nicely, and they attritioning Russian anti-air assets, and already we're hearing that some of the valuable targets inside of Russia are now being left unprotected. And I'm talking about some of the Putin's residents. So if before there was always some defenses on all of the Putin's residents, now it's only maybe a couple of them. And this goes together with kind of the next topic, is that in the last couple of days, we also seen Russia in general starting to run out of equipment. These all attacks on bikes that we've seen videos recently, they're not from the good lives. But the point that I'm still making is that Russia is starting to feel the pinch with the equipment. Now, I'm not stating that this is going to happen tomorrow or this is going to happen this summer. What I'm stating is that what Ukraine is doing is working. And what Ukraine is doing is creating opportunities. It's creating ambiguity for Russians. This is starting to destabilize the Russian positions that they have in Crimea and in generally in Ukraine. Because when we look at the map, we think, well, the map is static. So to kick Russians off, we would probably need to push them somewhere and then penetrate their front lines. Well, this was already done. I know all the critique that it was not there was no air support, not enough resources. This is all true. But the point is, still, attacking an army that is known for having a lot of resources and no restrictions on the use of anything, and they're ready to sacrifice as many men as necessary, maybe attacking them into the front is maybe not the best idea. However, distracting them, making sure that they cannot just dedicate a lot of forces to certain vulnerable positions and then undercut them, this might be an option. This might be also undercut not in Crimea. This might be undercut in some other parts on the front line. I don't know. What I'm stating is that the opportunities are starting to open up. Not now, not this summer. Ukraine should probably prepare more resources and get ready, but it is happening. Ukrainians are strategically undermining Russian positioning in Ukraine. Then I want to correct something that happened last stream. It was an unlucky situation. So I was talking about the F-16s that are coming to Ukraine. And I was showing President Zelensky and Mette Frederiksen, who is the Prime Minister of Denmark, sitting in a training airplane that had 2 seats. And I said that Ukraine needs 2 pilots to fly the airplanes. And because it happened together on the same screen, it overlapped into idea that there's a need for 2 pilots to be F-16s. And a lot of people misunderstood that. What I meant is that for Ukraine to fly F-16s, they usually assign 2 pilots to one single platform, 2 pilots even on more sometimes. I hope this corrects the record and we can move on. Then if we come back to the front lines, situation is developing in a neutral scenario. We were discussing different scenarios. I was telling you that it seems that we are going towards the optimistic scenario, that Russians will be stopped and Ukrainians will be able to stop Russian advances very, very much. And the situation has been developing mostly positively, but there are some asterisks. So first and foremost, Kharkiv direction. In Kharkiv direction, Ukrainians have been pushing Russians out both in Vovchansk. So they were pushing Russians off the city, and they were also pushing Russians out of Gliboki. There are already reports right now that Russians are considering whether or not they will be falling out, and they're preparing the positions for the withdrawal fights. But I'm not betting on it at all. So in a video that was about 3 weeks ago, I talked about that if in 2 weeks we will not see some major advances by Russians, then their Kharkiv gamble was a complete failure. Now the time has passed, so I can with all honesty say that I was right, everyone was wrong. well, not everyone, but the people that were claiming that Kharkiv is about to fall or something were wrong. So this is a monumental failure for Russia on many, many, many levels. But you can just assess it by the amounts of people that were dedicated to this area and achieving absolutely nothing, and now they're falling back. The negative part is that Ukraine had to move around certain forces, and while they're having a big success around the Kharkiv area, they're still struggling to fully stop Russians around the Avdiivka direction. That is the second part of the coin. That sometimes it's beneficial, like sometimes Ukrainians are doing great, sometimes they're not doing great. And here Russians are continuing advancing. So it seems that this direction specifically is going into the negative scenario. So most likely we will see that for this direction, Russians will continue advancing, and there will be a number of villages that Russians will still take in this direction before they're stopped. All other directions, it seems that we are still in the optimistic scenario. There are reports already from other parts of the front line that Russians are already trying to concentrate forces from all across the front line before they're trying to kind of get them towards maybe one direction to continue push. So they're squeezing the last juices that they can from these troops that are assaulting, both in Bakhmut direction or towards the Polohi, like Velika Novoselka direction, like around here somewhere as well. So that is happening. However, Ukrainians are also defending quite well despite the hard fights. Now, interestingly, Ukrainians have been using a very, very interesting new tactic up here north. So we will talk in a second about the drone operator warfare that Ukraine is introducing, and we're seeing that Ukrainians are experimenting and refining how drone operators work. One of the interesting things that Ukraine has been using is the Peaky Blinders unit that came in. So Peaky Blinders is a relatively new unit, at least to participate in the combat in Ukraine. And this unit has been trained, and it took a lot of experience from K2 battalion and other parts. And they have shown a very interesting tactic that turned out to be super effective against these advancing Russian troops. And I'm pretty sure it's going to start being copied all across the front line. There are a couple dependencies, mostly because that it requires a lot of drones. So the new tactic, if before was that Russian troops advance somewhere, so they reach a trench line, and I'm using just this as a canvas. Then they get into the trench line, and then Ukrainian drones come in and start bombarding the Russians in the trench line. And this turns out to be pretty good. Unfortunately, with time, Russians learned how to dig better trenches. They also became super aware how to fight drones. They also brought a lot of electronic warfare to specifically defend the trenches. And that's now a less lucrative target. That's became a lot harder. So Ukrainians adapted. And what they're doing right now is essentially starving the Russians out. What they're doing is that after Russians have been advancing, Ukrainians are actually targeting not the Russians, but they're bringing a lot of drone firepower. They're bringing in electronic warfare systems, and they're trying to cut the logistics supply. So they are literally just starving the Russians out. Russians here, within a week of this intense combat where any trucks that even tries to approach this direction gets blown up, anyone that is trying to arrive here with some kind of vehicle gets blown up, anyone that is trying to sneak at night gets blown up, everything that tries to move past this line just gets absolutely demolished. And Ukrainians, specifically these Peaky Blinders units, they are absolutely dominating this, which in the end ends up with Russian units that are stuck in the trenches, maybe having some suppression from the drones, but having absolutely no supplies. They're running out of ammo, they're running out of water, which is probably the most, because there has been so many videos recently where Russians were just like, we're just dehydrated, we have nothing to drink, literally. And this absolutely demolishes these units. That's how they were able to achieve the massive captures of units, the Russians just going in towards Ukrainian positions and capitulating, and Russians just absolutely abandoning positions, running around and so on, without the direct enforcements. Really great new tactic, and I'm going to be looking to see how this is going to be future developed, because I think at some point Russians will find some way to break this blockade, but I'm pretty sure Ukrainians are now looking into what they can do with this blockade in those situations when they'll have the time. And if we're talking about drone forces, we must talk about the appointment of Vadim Sukharevsky. So this is an absolute legend in the Ukrainian military. It's a person that was the first that started resisting Russian aggression. He was the person that has the famous phrase in the Ukrainian society, "Хули смотришь, стреляй," which would be roughly translated, "What the fuck are you looking at? Shoot back," at the Russians. And he was basically giving the commander and giving the first orders for his troops to fire at the Girkin's occupational forces that came in to Ukraine. This has been pretty good. So this person is very popular in the military. He is basically in a popularity maybe number one after Zaluzhny. And now he has been appointed as a commander of unmanned aerial vehicle forces. So Ukraine now has naval forces, air forces, ground forces, and drone forces. And this is absolutely good. He has a legend. He has clout. He has the reputation. And here, again, I wanted to say a few words to all of the pro-Ukrainian community that like to bitch on Zelensky and so on. We're going to talk a little bit more about this in the next video. But just now, it's like, you always bitch that it's always the Soviet generals that are being appointed. You always say that no one is being dismissed, nothing is happening. Yet here, you get an absolute legend being now set in charge as the drone aviation forces. Where is your Soviet styles? Where is your Soviet command? So if we are to consider that everything you say is true, then why don't you tell me like about the situation that happened in Ocheretino? There has been a big intelligence brief right now. Deep State did a big intelligence and analysis research on what's happened here. And it turned out that because of one specific unit, this whole situation got fucked up. And you know what? The commander of that unit was taken down. So is there prosecution or not? Oh, there was some issues where that the units on the first line were not digging trenches and were not prepared for the Russian aggression. Well, cool. What happened with the commanders of those units? Oh, they got dismissed again. Oh, so my question is, when you're stating that Syrskyi is supposedly this Soviet general, that the only thing he cares about is just to send men to the slaughter, the Soviet style, then why are you not consistent? You say one thing, and then on the other hand, something good happens. You say Zelensky is so bad, does nothing, absolute useless, and then take for granted all of the help that is being supplied because Zelensky working his ass off in the external politics. You say, oh, Syrskyi is coming to the front lines to micromanage the units at the front line, and then 2 weeks later is like, ha, we always knew that the Russian aggression on the north of Kharkiv is gonna fail. Why cannot you put two and two together? This is not that hard, right? No big organization is without errors. And you can never get along with a specific politician fully. However, when you consistently shit on something and just circle the misses, I want to make sure that you also notice the hits. For example, mobilization. One of the big problems that was never happening is the mobilization drive. Mobilization is now in full swing in Ukraine, and there are reports right now from the talking heads, which a little bit of a grain of salt for sure, but they're stating that in the last couple of months, they got more conscript that they got in a whole half year. Firstly, all the people that says no, Ukrainians don't want to fight for Ukraine, fuck you. Secondly, there it is. It's working. They just need to do work. If you think that everything should be fixed like this, and nothing happened, you have never worked in a big organization. Now, I was not part of the military. I work in a corporation, and I know just how slow and big and dumb the corporations are. And when even like all of the participants even have the expertise, some of the smartest freaking people work in corporations. But even you put these smartest people in the room with some corporate bureaucracy BS, and you're going to end up with a bad decision. It just happens. Now, obviously, there are actual errors, and obviously, there are certain Soviet things in Ukrainian military that needs to be worked on. What I'm stating is, if you don't have the full information, be less critical of the Ukrainian military, trust in Ukrainian military. So far, Ukrainian military has done amazing things, and it's doing more. I already talked about this strategically. Ukraine is softening up Crimea and opening opportunities for when it's going to have enough firepower. And talking about firepower, now I'm not gonna read this a lot because I think you should read this yourself. It's available in English. So Media Zona, which is a Russian the investigative reporting unit, did a great report on the price of Bakhmut, where they counted how many Wagner forces actually died in Bakhmut. So they did a whole research, and it's a long thing. But point is that the total number of dead Wagnerites is 19,547, which is a lot. Which is a lot more than what Yevgeny Prigozhin was taking, which only underscores that he was full of shit. And this number is so much closer to what Ukrainians were stating. It's actually amazing. Because remember, this is only dead. This is not counting the wounded. So wounded usually is like for one dead, there's usually 2 wounded. So that pushes this number to 60,000 casualties. And also, this counts only Wagner forces. It doesn't count some other forces that were participating quite extensively in this attack as well, such as VDV forces. They were participating there as well. They also had the losses there. It also does not count MIA forces, so missing in action. So in that sense, this number is also going to be up for a couple of thousands for sure. What I'm stating is that if the casualty rate goes towards 70, 80,000, you're getting into full-blown Ukrainian numbers, and it turns out that investigative journalists, when they finally start discovering, they see that Ukrainians' estimates are actually quite true, and Russians are full of shit, and they don't care about the lives of their soldiers. But what we do care about is Ukrainian armed forces. Now, we're trying this again. This is a support for the Ukrainian combat medics. We're trying to work the Ukrainian women movement, and they had some issues with the card payments, so you need to follow me thoroughly here. So I would call to you to participate, and let's get this medical evacuation truck to the Ukrainian armed forces. And to get this evacuation truck, you need to go into this page that I linked here. You can read this through. It's pretty nice. There's links to check out what's the organization, what they have been doing. But once you select the amount that you want to donate, then you click next. Then you can click credit card. And then you put your information in here. And then it gets you to this page where you usually would put your credit card information. Now, this doesn't work, unfortunately. It's the problem because they're located in Ukraine. They're not a European agency that is operating. What they were able to do, they were able to establish PayPal. So what you can do, once you get to this screen, you click PayPal, and then you say donate on PayPal, and you confirm. It asks me to make sure that I'm a robot. Yes, he says I'm a robot. And then it gets you, sorry for Danish, and then it gets you to this page. And here you can either donate through PayPal, or there is going to be a second button to make a contribution with a payment card. So sorry for this winded explanation. I really want to help these women. I just want to say these guys. Oh, wait, I can say guys for women as well. Yeah, because it's a general. Never mind. Stupid English language problems. Sorry, not first language. Yes, so let's help the Ukrainian armed forces. Let's get them this truck. So please support the Ukrainian armed forces. Next video coming up shortly this week. I love you guys. Slava Ukraini, and I'll see you next time.